To start off, I have a question for all of you in the room. What kind of social contact do we all need to be healthy, to be happy, to learn well, and to live long lives? This is the question I'm asking in the Village Effect, just a very small question. There's new evidence from the field of social neuroscience, which is a fairly new discipline, maybe about 15 years old at most, and it studies how our relationships affect our brains and bodies, and the reverse, how our brains and bodies affect our relationships. And the new evidence is telling us that our relationships have a really powerful impact on our thinking, our well-being, and yes, how long we live and how well we learn. Now, just as an example, the type of social contact you have influences how well you can fight off infection, like the common cold. That's research by Sheldon Cohn in Pittsburgh. It affects how fast tumors grow, not whether they're there in the first place, but whether they progress. There was this huge prospective study of nurses, about 3,000 nurses that followed them over time. And those with breast cancer were found to have 4 times the likelihood of survival if they had large in-person social networks. The lowest rate of dementia was found among people who had large circles of friends. So we're not just talking about colleagues or about other kinds of social networks that I'll get to in a minute. We're talking about the close friends and family that you see on a regular basis, and the people that you see a little less often perhaps, the people in your community or your colleagues, the kind of networking that you're doing right here. That altogether is what I'm calling the village effect. It's a metaphor for the kind of social contact that we all need to learn well and to survive and to thrive. Now, just a few words about how I came to writing this book. Wherever mature adults gather, you may discover that women outnumber men about 4 to 1. And that's because, as I discovered in my first book, The Sexual Paradox, which was about sex differences, all over the developed world, everywhere women do not still die in childbirth, women live longer lives than men, about 5 to 7 years longer on average. So if you go to places like libraries or seniors tours or community events, you'll find far fewer men than women. And I wanted to know why that was. That's what started me on this journey. And a critical factor I discovered is that women have much more extensive and integrated social networks. They tend to prioritize and groom their relationships over their lifetimes. They often look for work that's social, for example, which is one reason why many teachers are still women. Okay? It used to be that that was one of the few professions that was open to women, but now many women choose it purposely because it allows them to interact with people every day as part of their job. Now, this is not only a statistical fact, but it's also true in my own family. At the end of every workday, I actually come from a family of working women, and at the end of every workday, my grandmother picked up her black rotary model telephone. And despite the intimacy of her conversations with her friends, she had a list written in pencil of all the friends she would check up on every night, and she addressed them very formally as Mrs. D, Mrs. T, Mrs. S, Mrs. T, number 2, etc. And although this is not my mother, it could have been my mother. My mother carried on this tradition. We had a phone in the kitchen that had a 9-foot-long telephone cord, and she had it virtually glued to her ear as she moved around the kitchen, keeping up with friends and family in, Canada has very long winters. So that was her way of grooming her social network when she couldn't get out as much as she really wanted to. So this is a family tradition, and I carry it on. Except my network now looks like this. And let me just explain this to you a little bit. This is what's called a sociogram. So these are my relationships graphed out. Now let's see if I can get the pointer to work here. Does it work here? Let's see. If I can, I will, and if I can't, I won't. Oh, there we go. So if you look, the thick lines are strong relationships. The thin lines are weaker relationships. And remember that both are extremely important. And the circles are females, the triangles are males. And you may notice that some of them are in bold. And the ones that are in bold are the people who are profiled in this book. If you get to know a writer, you'll realize you'll appear in their writing sooner or later. And so they're the sources of many of the fascinating stories that are in my book. So as you can see, this is how social network scientists graph out your relationships. So for example, what they might do in a conference like this is measure who's talking to whom, how frequently, how animated their conversation is, etc. Now, getting back to why I wrote this book, The Village Effect, about 6 years ago I was sitting in a dark auditorium, kind of like this one, and I learned an amazing fact. There is one place in the world where men live as long as women. It's a remote mountainous region in Europe, which is called a blue zone, where super longevity is common in both sexes, meaning people live long, long lives. And it's the only place in the world, although a couple are catching up, where men live as long as women. Let's see if I can show you a picture. Oh, no, it's not advancing. Stuck. How about this? There. So here's what it looks like, and it's an island that's part of Italy. It's between Corsica and Tunisia, and in this blue zone, a remote part of Sardinia, there are 6 times as many centenarians as on the Italian mainland, which is just about 100 miles away. Not even. And there are 10 times as many as in the UK or North America. So it's really extraordinary. It's the only place, although there is one Greek island that's catching up, where men live as long as women, which should interest some of the men in this room. And this piqued my curiosity, so I decided to go there to research the science of the place and to find out what it takes to live to be 100. So let's meet some of these centenarians now. Maybe the battery is dead. What do you think? In the meantime, I'll use the computer. This fellow that you see on the left, his name is Pasquale Frascone, and he, in this picture, is about 105, but actually he lived to 110. And he also happened to be the uncle of one of the main researchers, whose name is Gianni Pez, who helped me discover the science of the area. He's one of Sardinia's supercentenarians. He was born the year the diesel engine was invented, so that's 1893, and he died the year Facebook was founded, so that's 2004. So he lived 110 years and 125 days. He continued to get around and go hunting and even shot a wild boar at the age of 105. I didn't get to meet him because when I went to Sardinia, he had already unfortunately left this world, but I heard that he was a very congenial man, fun to be with, active, always surrounded by friends and family. And that was, I discovered, the key. Everywhere I went, and you'll meet some of these centenarians that I interviewed there who are in the book, I would arrive with my interpreter, my daughter, who was traveling with me. She just graduated from university and had had a CBC fellowship and really knew how to work the digital tape recorder and was at loose ends, so I invited her to come along with me. And I discovered that first, we could never get any clean tape. We were making a radio documentary because everywhere we arrived, it was the village effect. Every centenarian was surrounded by neighbors, children, nieces, nephews, the priest, the baker. There was usually a crowd sitting there, and so it was actually quite difficult to get the kind of documentary sound that Rob has achieved in his film. Now, this fellow, whose name is Giovanni, in this picture he's 101, and he's with his niece above him who lives with him, and his grandniece, the younger one, in the rectangular glasses. Now, if you look at his face, you can see that he puts a lie to the notion that you have to have a positive attitude to live a long life. You know, he was pretty much one of the grumpiest people I've ever met. And I asked him, I said, Zio, which uncle in Italian, tell me, what do you think is your secret? Why do you think you've lived such a long life? And he said, nobody has to know my secrets. I thought, wow, I've come like about 5,000 miles and you're not going to give me anything? Like nothing? And I said, you know, maybe it's, I was trying to jolly him up a bit. Maybe it's the Cananao. This is the dark red wine that they make in the region that's quite famous. And he said, yeah, I like wine maybe a little too much. Yet, even though I actually found him quite disagreeable, but his niece up there who lived with him called him Il Tesoro, my treasure. And he was very precious to her, and she even kind of got annoyed with me when I asked, you know, how does it feel to live with a shut-in? You can't get out, you can't see your friends, you can't do things. She said, you Westerners, you just don't get it, do you? This is a privilege for me. Everybody I met there, of any age, but especially the elders, was surrounded by a large circle of family, friends, and what we social scientists call the integrated social network, the people you connect with as you move through your day, with whom they like to natter, as one of the experts said. And it was very different than the way you age in the United States or Canada, whereas George Burns, who was a comedian of my childhood, said, happiness is having a large, loving, close-knit family living in another city. There, people stayed quite close to home. Even the scientists I interviewed there, they saw their mothers and fathers, if they were still alive, every Sunday, which was quite something for me. And I discovered, not just through their amazing stories, but the research supports this. There's a study that just came out this March, so 2015. I mean, obviously too late for me to include in the book, but it showed that if you satisfy three conditions, either you live alone, you feel lonely, or you rarely spend time with people, on average, your lifespan is reduced by 30% compared to people who are otherwise like you, which is really quite shocking in our era of digital contact, I would say. It's something people very rarely think about. Let's meet another centenarian. Not all of them are as grumpy as this guy. Here you can see me with my daughter Eva, and here we have Zio Giuseppe, he's 102, with his sons, Angelo and Domenico, in his kitchen. You can see it's kind of crowded, but there was also my interpreter and a few other people in there who are not in the picture. Now, you can see from his face, he did have a positive attitude. He loved telling stories, he loved being with people, and it was a huge difference between the glowering, silent Giovanni and this outgoing fellow, upbeat. And it confirms the research that is surprising probably to most people, that there is no one personality type that promotes a long life or longevity. Looking on the bright side of life makes life more pleasant, but it doesn't make you live longer. It doesn't enhance your lifespan, which I think was a surprise to me and was a surprise to many people. So meeting these centenarians is just one of some of the stories I tell in this book, because the book is not just about health and lifespan, but is also about learning and parenting and all sorts of other issues. This lovely lady, Zia Teresa, she taught me a few recipes. She still cooks, which is amazing. She's 101. And their stories, including hers, help me understand the underpinning science, as well as a few little questions, important questions like, how long can I keep my marbles? And when am I going to die, and how can I put that day off? And as you will see, the answer is not what we expect. You know, if you thought about what reduces your chances of dying the most, and I'd like you to sort of entertain those guesses quietly in your mind right now. you'd be surprised when you actually face the evidence. The research was done by the same person, Julianne Holt-Lunstead, who did the study that came out in 2015, and she measured every aspect of people's lifestyles that they could control. You can't control your genes, for example. You can't control your income, for many of us. But what reduces your chances of things that you can control, what we call behavioral factors? So let's take a look at some of these possible risk factors. The first and foremost, I thought, was exercise or being a couch potato. Breathing clean air. How's the air in Cambridge, by the way? Good? Versus breathing polluted air. Little drinking of alcohol, not water, versus heavy drinking, meaning lots. Having your hypertension, your high blood pressure addressed or treated versus untreated. Whether you smoke or not, or whether you smoke quite a lot, 15 cigarettes a day or more. Whether you have a lean physique or you're packing on a few extra pounds. Whether you have a full social life, or whether you spend a lot of time by yourself or you're socially isolated. These are all factors that she measured. Whether you have high social support or low social support. What I mean by, and what she means by that is, social support are the people who bring you soup when you're not feeling well, okay? They're the people who lend you 100 pounds when you need it. They're your very close social contacts. Your parents, your best friend, your children, etc. Okay, that's what social support is. The people who are always there for you when you need them. As opposed to an integrated social life are the people who fill in all the little spaces in your social life. So if you think of your social life as a jar, and the big rocks are the people who are really close to you, and then filling in all the little interstices are all the people you meet throughout your day. You know, the people you talk to when you walk your dog, the person that you buy your newspaper, or when you did buy a newspaper, talk to. That's what I mean by a full social life. Whether you have cardiac rehab or where you have none. And so before I give you the results of these, think about what your guesses would be about what is the most predictive of people's health and longevity, although you probably have a pretty good idea. Here we have the bar graph with the most predictive on the top and the least predictive on the bottom. And I should really have started on the bottom, but anyway. Oh, good, I did. Sorry, Naomi Klein. I was just talking to somebody who was talking to me, another famous Canadian, Naomi Klein, who's written about environmental issues recently. So it's wonderful to breathe clean air, but compared to everything else that you can control, it's actually not that important. And interestingly, in the book, I profile a community, a religious community in the United States that lives in the most polluted area of the whole country. Most polluted water, most polluted air, because they're downstream from the aircraft industry outside of LA. But that's a side story. Next, whether you have your hypertension treated is next predictive. Your body mass index, whether you're lean versus overweight. Sorry about the inappropriate term. It's just that, you have to fit everything into those lines. So when I put overweight, it didn't fit. Cardiac rehab is next. So what's really interesting, and did you, by the way, manage to get the pointer to work? I'll have to point with my finger. Exercise, which I thought was paramount, right? I would try to make time every day for exercise. It is not even midway through the list, which fascinated me, because what the press usually reports is that it's more important than anything at all. It's pretty important for your mood, though. Whether you've had a flu vaccine is extremely important, more important than exercise. Who would have thunk it? Whether you were an alcoholic and you quit comes next. Whether you were a smoker and you quit comes next. Whether you smoke less than 15 cigarettes a day, and that's kind of interesting, right near the top. And the top two are the qualities of your social life. your social integration, meaning all the small contacts that you meet, including people here at this conference, your colleagues, and those close people who mean so much to you. Okay? So those two are the most predictive of how long you will live. Okay? And just to give you an insight on how they do this research, they take a huge group of people. In this case, it was 39,000 people. They measure everything about them, and then they just sit tight and come back to them 7 years later and see who's still standing and breathing. That's how they do it. Now, that leads me to the next question. What kind of social contact, we talked about the social contact that you need to live a long, healthy life. What kind of social contact do you need to stay focused, to learn and to stay connected? Because not all relationships are created equal. And not all types of communication are the same. When it comes to intimate connections, online networks can sometimes leave something to be desired. Okay? Yet we often confuse the two, especially when it comes to not only our elders, but our children. By the way, if you ever want to see the most hostile reaction to any criticism of digital activity, it's when you're facing a group of grandparents, because many of them only see their grandchildren via Skype, right? So they're very fond of the application. But especially when it comes to our children, when people found out I was writing about social networks, they all thought, oh yeah, that's really topical. They meant Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of other social networks, but they didn't understand that I was talking about the real social network. And our love affair, as everybody who's involved in education here in the room knows, our love affair with all things digital has transformed the classroom experience in less than one generation. And many students are now learning their basic skills from a screen, which leaves me with the question, so of all the academic factors that we can control, and yes, that we can measure, which of these factors best predicts academic success? And I'm going to look at a couple of studies. I can't look at them all. I think Rob Lowe on the website for relational schools quotes a meta-analysis of something like, 59,000 studies, something like that. I can't remember. But other than genes, what are the predictors? Okay? Your peers, whether it's a single-sex school, which I know is still popular in Canada, I imagine must still be popular here in the UK. The size of the classroom, access to classroom technology, which is, I would say, probably the biggest sales item for parents choosing schools today. The teacher's skills, and I should have put the apostrophe on the other side of the S, sorry. Family culture, the parents' earnings, okay. There might be, do we have any economists in the room here? There might be a few, I think. And parents or their substitute, a mentor's engagement. Now, you would be, I think, surprised about one robust predictor of academic success other than genes. What about parental engagement? Okay, we'll start with that. Or what we used to call, not that long ago, quality time. Okay? The quality of time that kids get from their parents, their teachers, their older siblings, and the important older people in their lives. A lot of it looks like this. It says, and then Winnie the Pooh decided it was time to check Daddy's email again. Now, technology is a convenience, but it's not always the best route to learning. And in fact, I would say it hasn't been shown to be the best route to learning for very many populations because of the crucial role relationships play. Let's look at some predictors of academic success other than genes. We'll go through the same list again. How about access to technology? Okay? this is what the classroom looks like today. The line says, anyone following me on Twitter already knows what I did this past summer. But of course, the teachers in the room know that this exercise is actually not about what you did this past summer, but about communicating to a group of people. And a lot of that is now beside the point. So if the school's embrace of classroom technology is not the best predictor of classroom achievement, and I make a very strong point in the Village Effect that it is not, and I amass all the data, and there is a lot of data. But interestingly, given how much money is being thrown at this initiative, there isn't a lot of data to show that technology, whiteboards, laptops, tablets in the classroom, have any gains on the traditional classroom. Okay, most of the research after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years shows, as I put it, the second three most important words in the human language, no significant differences. Okay, what about the quality of the teacher's communication skills? The teacher's relationship with the students. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to give away Rob's film, but I will give away that top little factoid that I alluded to that comes straight from Rob. I just cribbed it right from him. 52,000 studies, a meta-analysis showing that teacher quality was the most important factor in terms of educational outcomes. And a study done by economists in the States did something similar to Rob, which is that they looked at educational data and looked for outliers, schools that were underperforming or in underperforming areas, and cherry-picked the teachers who were, for some reason, getting extraordinary results, and looked at what happened if they could move them to a different classroom. And lo and behold, they had enormous impact just by moving them for 1 year. So after 1 year with a skilled teacher between grades 3 and 8, do I need to translate that for a UK audience? I know you call it form, right? So it's the third grade, meaning about age 8 to 8th grade, which would be probably about age 14, 13, 14, okay? So after 1 year, just one single year with a talented, devoted teacher, a teenager is less likely to become a parent, more likely to go to college, meaning university, more likely to go to a selective college, will earn $250,000 more as an adult over their lifetime, more likely to live in a good, safe neighborhood, and that's my favorite. Which teenager thinks about saving for retirement? I'm sure there isn't one alive, but all this to say, teachers in the room, you are having an impact. When your students retire, you are still having an impact. Now, not only has technology transformed the classroom, as you all know, it's transformed the child's home experience as well. So right now, the statistics are pretty shocking. First of all, unique to the UK, not unique to the UK, but in the UK, most parents think that they buy lots of technology and smartphones, tablets, whatever they can get for their kids because they think it's good for them, okay, and it's good for their education. Right now, kids in the North America and UK spend more time with a screen than they do on any other activity except sleeping. So that's kind of interesting since they're supposed to be spending a lot of time in school, right? And it means that a lot of their experience they gain not by looking face to face, not by picking up nonverbal cues, okay? Not by engaging with other people, but this way. This says she thinks it's a touch screen. Now, we don't, because this is still early in our experiment, we don't really know what the impact of this will be. Okay, we can't tell yet. It's too early. We don't have the outcome studies, really. But right now, we do know that a child's playtime looks more like this than it does like this. Okay, this is actually a picture of me, age 5, learning how to play gin rummy with my maternal grandparents. And when I showed this, I did a joint presentation with my brother, and he looked at the slide and he said something like, "You have like way too many cards in your hand." And that might explain the look of consternation on my face, right? It looks like I'm really, really concentrating. So the question is there any difference? Like, why distinguish? I mean, there are academics, and there are plenty of them out there who say that there's no difference. Why distinguish between face-to-face and digital activity? Just very quickly, because I want to leave enough time and energy for the film, when you connect with somebody face-to-face, there's a whole cascade of neurotransmitters that are released. Oxytocin surges through your bloodstream. It tamps down stress, makes you feel good in the here and now, and protects you well into the future. It allows you to lower your guard. It allows you to trust more. And those people who've had to solve difficult problems know that the first thing you have to do